couple of minutes to get everything up.
No worries.
Do. Uh,
Okay.
right.
You send the link already?
Just coming now. It's just gone
Okay,
live. So there you go. Let me know if you got that.
I do.
Right. Okay. So, hi, folks. Whoever's joining us so far, give me 2 minutes. As everyone knows, it's going to take me a couple of minutes to get this out on social media. But once we do, you'll be able to get your questions in for Sluggo. Right, here we go. Da, da, da. Yeah, so Sluggo, what have you been up to today? Because I think you're 7 hours behind us. I think it's.
Yes, it's noon here in Utah.
So, what have you been up to this morning? Have you been? Is it a nice chilled morning?
Actually, I have been working on graphics.
Oh
I
yes, yeah, yeah.
drawing a 15 for a customer in Alaska,
Wow,
flies for Alaska Airlines, and he is going to retire soon. But he flew F-15s and F-5 aggressors
oh wow,
before he got out of the Air Force and went to Alaska Airlines. He
wow.
has a hangar north of Anchorage, and he wants a 20-foot F-15 for the wall of his hangar.
Bloody hell, 20 foot.
I've done a 30-footer, Mike.
Wow.
I did a
30
30-footer
foot.
for a guy.
And yeah. So tell us about that. Like, how does that? Because obviously, for everyone who doesn't know, Sluggo, Mark Hasara, he produces like wall prints. What's it? So if you could tell us a bit about that, why I get this out to social media.
Three of us who were big-time plastic model airplane builders created a company about 9 months ago, almost 12 months ago now, called Wall Pilot. And we've been doing it through Facebook. And we've had a huge response. And we had a guy that asked for a particular airplane for his hangar, and he asked for it 30 feet long. So it was 30 feet long and 8 feet at the tail,
Wow.
which he plastered on the side of his hangar, which is down in Fort Myers, Florida. We've had several people order more than one. One guy wanted all 6 of the airplanes he flew when he was on active duty in the Air Force to include MiG-21 and MiG-23. He flew with the famous Red Eagle Squadron out of
Ah,
Area,
yes.
the 4477th Test Evaluation Squadron,
Yeah.
and he was one of the original guys in it. So
Wow.
he wanted a MiG-21 and a MiG-23 with his name on it. And I have one artist who's been doing profiles for over 25 years, and he made the MiG-21 and the MiG-23 in about 48 hours. And
Oh,
I
really?
asked, I said, Jack, how did you draw this thing? And he goes, oh, I have the Czechoslovakian Air Force pilot manual for the MiG-23 up here on my shelf, and I just took it out and used that to do the drawing.
Wow.
So it's really accurate. It's amazing when you see it.
Uh huh.
And he had 6 8-foot graphics done, MiG-21, MiG-23, F-5, because he flew F-5 aggressors in the Philippines, and then 2 F-4s, F-4D, F-4E, and F-15.
Wow.
And he's on the back wall of his hangar behind his airplane, and he also had us do the patches for each one of those squadrons too. So he's got 2 of the Red Eagle patches, the 26th Aggressor patch from the Philippines, the 12th Fighter Squadron from Kadena, the 36th Fiends from Osan, and then the 94th for the F-15 next to it. It really looks cool. I'll send you a picture of it, Mike, so you can put it up and everybody can see it. But
Yeah, yeah, because
great.
like I've seen some of like your work on obviously Facebook and stuff like that, and the detail is amazing. And like I think uh, there's a couple of photos. It looks like they were in hangars and stuff like that, and they just
Yeah,
look absolutely brilliant.
yeah, yeah. It's crazy. Some of these guys, like I say, are buying 8-footers, and the one guy that bought 6, he put them on sheet plastic and mounted them on sheet plastic, and then bolted them to the wall because it's a corrugated kind of hanger, corrugated tin kind of, and it looks fantastic. Another guy bought 2 F-16 and an F-4, and put those on some kind of wallboard, and that he had painted white, and put those up in his hangar too. But people, you have to understand, they peel off and you can stick them to the wall. They're really sticky. We had one that we put on the ceiling in my in-laws' house that stayed up there for 8 years. You can take them off. You can take them off and move them. The best way to move them is put them on a plastic shower curtain and roll it up.
Right.
And like I said, the 8-footers, Mike, you can read the stenciling on the missiles. We actually went out and found the stencil guides for the Sparrow and the AMRAAM and the Sidewinder and the bombs. And an 8-footer, you can see all of that detail. It's pretty amazing.
That's awesome. So, like, yeah, while the questions come in, like, where can we find you online, Sluggo, for the Wall Pilots? Do you have a website or you're on social media?
The website is being built because we just moved it to a new server.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll be up in about 2 weeks. But we have a Facebook page called Wall Pilot. It's just facebook.com/Wall Pilot. And you can send us a message there. And we do custom graphics. Our website will have like ready to buy graphics if you want those. But we can put your name on the side of an F-15, any unit markings of an F-15, and I'm just using F-15 as an example, any missile load. We've done F-15Es all the way down to a P-4B, P-4Y privateer.
Wow, okay.
A guy was a firebomber and flew firebombers, the Borat retardant bombers, and asked us to do a privateer for him. And so we've even been able to do that. We can do all the way back to World War I. We have artwork done for like Fokker DR-1s, SPADs, Sopwith Camels, and of course all the modern military airplane, World War II, Korea. Jack, one of my artists, has 13,000 profiles drawn.
Whoa.
13,000.
Wow.
He has every B-17 drawn from every squadron in 8th Air Force and 15th Air Force, and B-24s too. So, and they're amazing when you see them. You go to our Facebook page, Wall Pilot, and you'll see some of these. Some of the ones we've been working on recently too.
That's awesome. Like, so we're getting the questions coming in now. So, like, I'm gonna try and get some more out on social media, but you can see them coming in there, Sluggo, on the side. So I'm gonna let you take it away, and yeah, guys, get your questions in because Sluggo's a legend, and yeah, you're gonna have a great Q&A. So enjoy, mate.
Thanks. Okay. Hang on here.
Because Sluggo's a legend, and yeah, you're gonna have a great Q&A. So enjoy, mate.
Thanks, Mike. Mirrored Window asks, any thoughts on the role of the crew chief as a pilot works with them, I worked with fantastic crew chiefs. And let me tell you a story about one particular crew chief I worked with, Desert Storm. Her name was Vonnie Peterson. And I talk about this in my book, Tanker Pilot. She was fantastic. And I've had great relationships with all of the crew chiefs of every airplane I've flown. They have been just absolutely wonderful, particularly when we have a broken airplane or something that's causing the mission to slow down. The crew chiefs are absolutely vital to fixing the airplanes. They're always out 2 or 3 hours before a mission to work on the airplane. And the day before the opening night of Desert Storm, Vonnie told me that she and her assistant crew chiefs had been out at the airplane the day before, which was a stand-down day. We didn't do any flying. And she'd gone through what's called the 781, the maintenance manual, and had fixed all of the what we call red diagonal issues in the airplane. I mean, it was perfect. And her airplane, 8019, is still flying to this day. So think about that. I flew that airplane on the night of 17th of January, 1991, and 8019 is still flying to this day. I can't say enough about crew chiefs. They work long hours fixing the airplanes. Some of them have flown with me on a number of missions, and crew chiefs are fantastic. I cannot remember a crew chief in my career that wasn't on the ball, fixing the jet, walking around with me, looking at things, anxious to see us when we got back, always up the ladder first, asking us, hey, what do we need to fix? Just fantastic crew chiefs I've worked with. MKMD exploration. What is the longest air-to-air refueling you have done? The longest mission I've flown was a training mission, 15 hours. That is a long time to be in the seat, a very long time to be in the seat. The largest offload I've had was into a B-52. It was 103,500 pounds. Now think about that, 103,500 pounds. And this B-52 had 2 refuelings like that. One near Hawaii, and we were in Guam. The airplane, this buff was flying nonstop from Castle Air Force Base in Merced, California, to Australia is where it was going. Australia. It was going to Darwin for a big exercise called Pitch Black. And we were hooked up for almost 22 minutes straight. Our pumps, with all 4 pumps going, we're pumping 6,000 pounds a minute. So divide 103,000 by 6,000 pounds a minute. You know, that kind of tells you how long it took us to do that. That's a long time to be connected. So that's my longest flight and my largest offload. It's a great question. When you talk about air refueling and air refueling math, it's always in large numbers. During the war in Iraq, the invasion of Iraq, in 26 days, we offloaded into other airplanes 417,133,000 pounds of jet fuel. Now, how do you wrap your arms and head around 417 million pounds of gas? That amount of gas will allow a Ford F-150 truck to make 2,685 round trips to the moon, or 8 round trips to the sun. That's how much gas that is, and that's how much we just transferred into other airplanes in 26 days of the invasion of Iraq in 2003. We typically take off with 180,000 pounds of gas, and that's more gas you'll use in your family vehicle in 27 years. It's a little over 27,395 gallons, U.S. gallons, I think that is. A typical family uses about 1,000 gallons a year. So that's how much gas tankers are using around the world. Since 9/11, the U.S. Air Force tanker fleet has transferred, I think it's 24 billion pounds of jet fuel into other airplanes. So you can understand why we say nobody kicks ass without tanker gas. We really are the vital link to getting airplanes around the world because it takes so much gas to do it. It doesn't matter if it's airplanes deploying to the Middle East region, airplanes that are flying combat missions, or even humanitarian missions of C-5s flying to the Far East when we had the tsunami relief back in, 2006 or 2008. The C-5s were getting refueled near Alaska and then again close to the Japanese mainland. And they were taking on 260,000 pounds every time they got gas. It usually took 2 to 3 tankers, KC-135s or a KC-10, to put that amount of gas in a C-5. So that's kind of a little bit about how much gas we're using. The frickin' Poonie, give the RAF employees the E3, C-17, RC-135, and P-8. Do you think it was a mistake not to equip the Voyager fleet with booms? If there's one thing we learned from being in combat is you must have both refueling systems. And if I'm not mistaken, the RAF is actually thinking about sending their Voyagers back down to Madrid to put booms on them. The Australians have both boom and drogue, and theirs are also air refuelable, and that's really the dream tanker. Reason being, I can fill it up full of gas by sending another tanker up to it, which we did with the KC-10s all the time, and then they can give that gas to any type of receiver, whether it's a probe and drogue receiver, a boom receiver. But a majority of the RAF airplanes are probe receivers. So I understand why their Voyagers are basket only, drogue only. But I think they've learned that now that they've got the P-8s and these other airplanes, that they're going to need booms, and they can send the airplanes back to Madrid to the Airbus factory down there where they get the, we call it the tanker sex change from the A330 Airbus to the MRTT tanker. But that's a great question, and that's one of our lessons learned almost from every war is you have to have boom and drogue capable tankers, and the tankers have to be air refuelable, and the radio package and the navigation package on the tanker has to be really good. In other words, VHF, UHF, HF radios, so we can talk short range, long range distances. And one of the things that really helps the tanker crews out is the KC-10 has the ability to be an airborne navigation aid. So they can put in their tactical air navigation system a certain frequency, like 92 Yankee, and anybody else that comes up 29 Yankee, all of the needles will point to the tanker and give them a readout of how far away that is. And the old KC-135s did not have that. The KC-10 was built with that. That's why they call it the mothership, because you can find it real easy and it's got really good lighting. You have to remember the KC-135s were built in the 1950s. The first one is a 55 model that went into the inventory in 56 or 57. The last one came off the line in 64. The KC-10s are 80 through 82 models, so they have a lot better avionics. And all of the electronics and avionics in both airplanes now have been upgraded to the glass cockpit Pacer Crag configuration, which is fantastic. One of the things that's helped us in the KC-135 is what's called terminal collision avoidance system, which you can tune or turn it to 40 miles extended range. So anything that comes in that 40-mile bubble around you, you can see, and we'll ask our receivers to put their Mode 3 IFF squawks in their box, and we'll see them as soon as they come up. It's really nice to have that. Did you enjoy the cookies and pizza while flying? Here's the difference between the KC-10. They're the ones that have the ovens. So they're always having cookies and pizza. I'm always having cold sandwiches and milk and things like that. So if I had a pizza, it's one I brought with me out to the airplane. But on the KC-10, that's very different because they have the really nice electronic ovens that they can cook that kind of food in. So they're having pizza and cookies and all kinds of things. But I'll tell you something about one of my flights with the RAF. I have flown twice on RAF VC-10s when I was deployed to Incirlik Air Base, Turkey. And in Turkey, you could buy loaves of bread for about 30 cents or something. So going out to the restricted operating zone near northern Iraq, they would have bacon and cheese sandwiches going out and ham and cheese sandwiches coming back because they had a really nice oven in their airplane too. So a lot of airplanes have these electronic ovens in them that allow you to cook all kinds of cool food. So
before we move on here, Sluggo, I'm gonna get a cheeky question in here because
Sure.
I remember you said that when you were refueling like the F-14s, they used to swing the wings back and forth. Did you used to do that with the Tornadoes as well?
Yes, it was a lot of fun watching that.
Okay.
You know what we do, Mike? This is what was cool about doing swing wing airplanes, like the F-111. The F-111 was the same way. They'd always come up and ask for some extra gas, which was always a lot of fun because you knew what they were going to do. If you'd been in the tanker community for a while, you knew what they were going to do. So I did a mission refueling F-14s with Dave Parsons. Hey, Joe, who's been on your show.
Yes,
And
yeah.
he came up and he goes, hey, how much can you give us? And I said, how much do you want? He says, can you give us 10,000 pounds each? And I said, yeah, sure, we got plenty. So we loaded up his wingman. We loaded him up. And there's a picture in my book that shows him outside the window with his camera up to his face, taking pictures of me while I'm taking pictures of him, which was kind of unusual. And when they were done, his pilot is named Dog. Jim Kuhn was his name. And I heard Dog's voice go, gypsies, burners, now. And you saw the engine nozzles open up and then the big tongues of flame come out. And
Wow.
they skyrocketed up to like 32,000 feet. They probably burned 2,000 pounds
Crikey.
going up there. But you could see the wings sweep back And as they're gathering speed and everything coming right off of our wing, some of the Tornado guys would do the same thing. The F-111 guys, you got to remember the F-111 holds a lot of gas.
Yeah.
So they would, blow off beside us. It was always cool to see that, particularly at night. But at dusk, like at sunset or sunrise, when the sun's just coming up, those big, long tongues of flame, Mike, were just incredible to see. And that's some of the images that I will never forget in my mind.
Stick in your mind, yeah.
Oh, man, you see those pictures like that. It was just fantastic. It's a great question.
Yeah, so sorry, guys, I took up a question there, but yeah, Mark, I'll let you get cracking on with the questions there, but I appreciate that.
Sure, no problems. That's a great question because it was always fun seeing the wings go back. And like I said, when Dog said gypsies, burners now, as they began to accelerate, you just saw the wings just go back.
Straight back,
you knew that they were going to have some speed. So
brilliant.
Scott Grimwood, I'm assuming you have seen the film Indispensables on air refueling in the 1960s. How has air refueling changed since then? I have not seen that movie. But let me tell you a little bit about how refueling has changed since then. We owe a debt of gratitude to the British because they really kept air refueling going. Sir Alan Cobham and Flight Refueling Limited, they patented the first air refueling system, the looped hose grappled line system. They also created the Drogue system that we have now. And a little while back, I got a Facebook friend request from a gentleman by the name of Christopher Hornich. His father was Peter Hornich, the test pilot, who flew a Meteor and kept it up for 12 hours testing air refueling, flying back and forth, refueling off of Lancasters. And they used the Drogue system, and they put a probe in the nose of the Meteor. There's actually some really fantastic pictures that were taken out the back of the Lancaster doing that. The boom system came about in 1947-48. They tried to refuel a B-47 through a Drogue, and it took like 70 or 90 minutes. It was really a long time because you can only put 1,000 pounds of gas through the hose. And that's when Curtis LeMay said, that dog don't hunt. We got to come up with a better way to do that. And he went to Boeing, and Boeing was the first company to actually patent the flying boom technology. And they did it with two B-29s. The first test they did was, do we have the boom on the airplane above the receiver? Do we have the boom on the airplane on the bottom connecting to the tanker? I mean, they went through all kinds of different tests to see. And that's where they found out having the flying boom on the bottom of the B-29 and the receivers come up underneath them was really the way to go. So they created KB-29Ms, Mamas, with the Drogue refueling system. And the first combat air refueling mission was on the 6th of June in 1951 when 3 RF-80 Shooting Star photo reconnaissance airplanes refueled from a KB-29 that was off the coast of Wonsan, North Korea. That was the very first combat air refueling. Throughout the Korean War, more tankers came on with the flying boom. Those were called KB-29 Papas. And you would hear fighters call in, are you a mama or a papa? And the reason they were asking that question was they were trying to find out if the KB-29 was a Drogue or a boom-equipped airplane by asking if it was a B-29M or a B-29P. As jets came on, the KC-97 obviously was too slow. Bill Allen, the CEO of Boeing, said we have to have a jet-powered tanker, which subsequently became the KC-135. But we had to have a high-speed boom because we were flying, we refuel fighter jets at 315 knots, and the earlier booms on the KC-97 and the KB-29s and the KB-50s couldn't handle that kind of speed, and it was causing a big speed disparity between the fighters, and the fighters were real close to their stall speeds. They had to do what's called a toboggan in the KC-97s, where once they hooked up, they would begin about a 300 foot per minute descent so that the B-47s and some of the fighters could stay on the boom behind them. Obviously, the KC-135, not a problem. But the KC-135, when it initially came into the fleet, was to refuel the bombers that were doing the nuclear war mission. Then Vietnam rolled around, and we were doing a lot of fighters as well as bombers. The boom systems have changed. Obviously, KC-135 has the boom operator in the back. KC-10 has the boom operator in the back. We've gone to a video system. The video system in the KC-46 has been problematic for the airplane. The Airbus video system has been working pretty well. So, and I see there's a question about KC-46s here, and I'll get to that here in just a second. But we still have to use the Drogue systems. We still have to use the boom system. Fighters use the Drogue, the probe and Drogue, simply because it saves a lot of weight. The universal air refueling receptacle is very heavy and takes up a lot of space. So that's why a lot of fighters just use the probe and Drogue. But Curtis LeMay is the one who said all of our fighters will have receptacles because we can pass a lot more gas through that. Like I mentioned to you, we can pump 6,000 pounds a minute through the boom. F-16, we use one pump, which is about 1,500 pounds a minute. F-15s have a bit larger refueling pipes, so we can use two pumps, 3,000 pounds a minute with them. And then 1,000 pounds a minute is our rule of thumb for pumping out of the Drogue through the hose. So the really big difference between the 1960s air refueling system and now is you don't have a person in the back. In the A330 and in the KC-46, the boom operator actually sits up front. I have my own opinions about that. I would prefer to have a guy in the back, but hey, that's technology for you. All right, next question. Brockwell Lane, are the refueling tanks situated inside the fuselage where the seats would be in a 707? If so, can you walk down the full length of the jet? Brockwell, great question. The tanks in the KC-135 are actually under the floor. So what would be the baggage area in the old 707s are big fuel tanks, the forward body, center wing tank, and the aft body tank in the KC-135. In the wings, we have actually 3 tanks per side. We have a reserve tanks that are kind of out toward the wingtips, and then 2 more tanks in the wings. We do not separate the tanks when we're refueling and flying. We pump the same gas that we're using to fly the airplane. You monitor the fuel system, and you can only pump out of the center wing, or excuse me, the forward body and the aft body tanks. 2 pumps in the forward body tank, 2 pumps in the aft body tank. So we'll drain fuel forward and aft to get our offload. And when you're doing 103,000 pounds like I did with that B-52, you're draining a lot, pumping a lot, and you have to watch the airplane CG, obviously. You always try to keep a little bit of an aft CG to keep the airplane kind of up like this, because that allows you better gas mileage. The R model engines were huge for the KC-135. We had the ability to pump about 40% more gas because of the efficiency of the R model engines. They're fantastic engines. Fantastic engines. It really made the KC-135 and almost a different tanker. We can fly out of 8,000 foot runways, go into 8,000 foot runways. The engines are actually tuned down from 28,000 pounds to 22,000 pounds. But all of the tanks in the KC-135 are all under the floor. It's the same with the KC-10, same with the KC-46, and the A330 Airbus. Now the KC-97, because it was a prop-driven airplane, did have fuel tanks on the floor of its cargo compartment all the way to the back, and you had to walk around them. Because they were refueling jets, Brockwell, they had to have separate fuel tanks because the prop engines weren't burning the same kerosene as the jet engines. So in the KC-135 and all the tankers now, you can walk straight to the back if you need to. It's just a cargo floor. All the tanks are under the floor, so it's not a problem. Okay. Favorite aircraft you saw? Shadow Claw 24. That's a really fascinating question. The first time I refueled an F-117 was surreal. It was still a classified airplane. You know, everybody knew it was out there because of that silly picture that they released of it that you couldn't see much other than this black arrowhead. And I was really anxious to refuel it. My co-pilot and my navigator had been part of what's called the Busy Spartan program in the States when it was when the F-117 was still classified. Busy Spartan was the nickname for the air refueling program for the F-117, and they'd both been in that program. So we got picked about a week after I showed up for Desert Shield, Desert Storm in 1991 to be a Busy Spartan team. And I tell you, the first time you saw that jet, you just went, that is amazing. And it was. You just see this black jet out there bobbing up and down next to your wing. It's just surreal. And I went to the back to watch the second air refueling we were doing. And the F-117s would come up underneath us. But the really cool thing was their air refueling doors roll over like this. And when we saw the air refueling door roll over like that, my boom operator goes, "This is the cat's ass. This is the cat's ass." It was amazing to experience that and to see that black jet underneath you. The B-2 has a similar air refueling door. It also rolls over. And the first time I did B-2s, again, reminded me a lot of the F-117 refueling that I had done for the very first time. Seeing both of those black jets underneath you is pretty amazing. Some of the international airplanes we've done, I've done Turkish F-4s. I mean, they're still flying F-4Es down there. I've done Tornadoes. I've done a lot of other international airplanes, but the C-5 fills up the window. I mean, it's just massive. And if he moves, we move because of the slipstream around both airplanes, which you have to be kind of careful of. So I think probably my most favorite aircraft that I saw was probably the F-117 because, again, it had been in a classified program. It was just surreal seeing it for the first time. You got used to it after about the fifth or sixth refueling, but just watching it for the first time, watching that air refueling door roll over like that was just amazing. Tim Harris asked if I was ever based at Mildenhall. No, I wasn't. I went the other way. I spent 5 years in Okinawa, Japan, and just absolutely loved it. Tim, air refueling at Mildenhall and Kadena Air Base in Okinawa is very different. It's very leading edge. You're constantly involved in some type of world event. I mean, just think the other day, was it last week? B-52s were flying around Europe, flying across numerous countries into the Baltic, and tankers out of Mildenhall were refueling them. All the different places they went, and some of their escorts too. The Russians provided some escort for them also, which would have been kind of interesting as a tanker guy watching a Su-27 or 35 roll up outside. But I went to Kadena and spent 5 years there, and it was the best flying experience that I had. And it was also the greatest learning opportunity I had for air refueling. I have 10 catapult assisted takeoffs and 10 arrested landings on 8 aircraft carriers. And the first couple times I visited an aircraft carrier while I was at Kadena. And that's amazing to watch from the deck. Watching F-14s and F-18s and EA-6Bs and Hawkeyes and S-3 Vikings launch 26 airplanes off of the deck in less than 10 minutes is just an amazing thing to see. But we got to do everything at Kadena. We were involved with operations over North Korea. We were involved with operations down in the South China Sea. We were involved with humanitarian operations when typhoons would come in and wipe out a bunch of islands. We really did a lot of different things while based at Kadena, and the same thing happens at Mildenhall. They get involved with a lot of different refueling missions. You'll notice the Mildenhall tankers all have the wingtip refueling pods, the MIPPERS pods, as well as the boom, which makes it a very versatile airplane for the exercises that they're in, real world things that go on over there, because they can refuel probe and drogue airplanes as well as boom airplanes. So I did not go to Mildenhall. Love being at the beach, come home from flying and take my kids to the beach in Okinawa. But Mildenhall has a lot of great things about it too. And again, Kadena and Mildenhall fly very similar types of missions, strategic, operational, tactical missions on a daily basis. The Freakle Puny asking, what is the favorite? Hang on just a second. How have you felt about being an RAF Victor tanker pilot during the Falklands War Black Buck missions, given one or two of them nearly ran out of fuel? There's been a couple times where I didn't have a lot of gas in my airplane either. I have read a lot about the Black Buck missions, and you just do the mission and you do the math and figure out what the gas is going to be. Landing back at Ascension after passing all that gas to the Vulcans, that was really an air refueling feat, in my opinion. That was an incredible feat to move all the gas amongst the tankers, move all the gas into the different Black Buck missions that were going down there. My hats off to those guys that flew those Black Buck missions. Those were really incredible when you read about how they had to set up the refueling because of the range and how far the Black Buck missions were flying. I mean, just phenomenal. So, Freako Puny is also asking, what is the favorite and worst plane you have refueled in terms of flight characteristics? Favorite, F-15, just because it's easy, and those guys are protecting us. Worst, I wouldn't say worst, it's just difficult, is the C5 and the C-17 because they're so big and the airflow around them affects the tanker. So here's the interesting thing about refueling C5s and C-17s. Because of the airflow over the top of the airplanes, when they come underneath us, it pushes our tail up, which means it causes us to descend. And you really have to keep up with the trim as the C5 moves in underneath you. They do it very slowly. And when a C5 backs out real fast, that airflow causes our tail to bump up, and it really gets exciting, okay? And we had a training item that we had to do where we would refuel manually with the autopilot off large airplanes. And one of the briefing items that we'd always have before we did autopilot off air refueling with a C5 is do not come in fast or back out fast, because it really got exciting when they backed out too fast and the airplanes would converge. And there's been one or two instances where they've had to call breakaways, and the tankers had to climb to get out of the wake turbulence or the airflow over the C5's nose. And here's the other fascinating thing about that too, is when you try and move your nose up to get away from the C5 during a breakaway, the airflow over his nose kind of holds you a little bit. And it's kind of freaky and kind of scary because the airplane doesn't react real fast. And it's just, I've never had to do a breakaway with a C5 for real. All of my breakaways have been with either B-52 or fighters. So that was just a really challenging doing a C5. Okay, next question. MKMD. Were you ever stationed in the UK? No, I think I just mentioned that. I came through the US the UK a number of times from the US. Stayed at Mildenhall. I take that back. I was TDY to Fairford twice, out in the Cotswolds. The European Tanker Task Force was based out of Fairford, and that was a lot of fun. The communications, the comms are a little different. You guys use some different terminology than we do in the States. So that's kind of one of the differences. Touch and go to us is a roller to you. A low approach is an airfield approach to you guys. I'm sure you've heard that on the radio. So there's some communications differences, but really it's not that much different. Loved flying out of Fairford. We stayed in Cirencester. Our crew did for a while, which was kind of interesting, going to the little church there and seeing the gold cup that Henry VIII gave Anne Boleyn for her wedding present. You know, you've got so much history in the United Kingdom that we just don't have here. Things are so old, you know, 600-year-old organs in some of your churches. We just don't have that here. But I really enjoyed my time when I was in the UK at Fairford twice. And we were there, first time I was there 45 days. Second time I was there, we were there for 75 days. So we really enjoyed it. I don't drink, but I enjoyed going to the pubs. I found out some of the best food was at the pubs instead of the restaurants. So it was fun to be there and to interact, particularly with the RAF when we were deployed down to Turkey. You had the Jaguars down there, you had the VC-10s down there, and about 2 Fridays a month after flying, we'd all have a big party in the billeting area. The RAF guys always had their Guinness and things that they brought to grill and stuff. That was always a lot of fun. So, Swanee01, did you ever get to fly the Q model tanker that refueled the SR-71? Yes, I did. The Q model was the water wagon version, the old A model engines. The T model was the CFM 56 version. And there was an extra switch on the co-pilot side. And that switch allowed you to drain fuel into the forward and aft body tanks, because this SR-71 had to carry JP-8 fuel in it because of the altitude that they were at and the friction on the tanks. The gas in the tanks would actually boil because of the speed they were going at and the friction heating up the skin of the airplane. So as far as the cockpit, that was really the only difference in the Q and T models, was that extra switch above the co-pilot's right knee on the right side of the cockpit. Everything else was pretty much the same. I never did a SR-71 refueling. The SR-71s had left Okinawa about 9 months before I got there. So I never, I saw one in flight one time because it was coming back into Beale and we were flying across California. They always had the call sign Aspen. Their training call sign was Aspen. And this guy was coming down out of like 60,000 feet, descending to like 30,000 feet, going into Beale to get ready to land. It was really interesting listening to him. Frickle Puny is asking, any near misses or actual scrapes using the boom you experienced? I've lost my nozzle on my very first Desert Shield mission. We had a Saudi F-15 come up underneath us and got a little preoccupied with all of us that were in the boom pod, and he's looking up like this, looking at us, and he's waving and doing all this. He's not watching what he's doing. And he ran underneath us. He moved too far underneath us. We couldn't get the nozzle out. We called a breakaway, and he just pushed the stick and the throttles forward and snapped our nozzle rough. And the pumps are going, and gas is pouring out the boom. He gets out of the way. We close the line valve and everything, and he comes back up, says, Stallion 6-1, request pre-contact. And Mike Densmore, my boom, looked at him like, what did he just say? I said, Mike, he wants his gas. He goes, well, we can't give him any more gas. He's got our nozzle. And I've got a picture of it in the book, Tanker Pilot. You'll see it. And he was persistent. He kept saying, Stallion 6-1, I need my gas. Mike Densmore said to him, dude, you took the only way we have of giving gas. It's in your receptacle. And you see him go like this and look over, shake his head like this because he saw the nozzle. And he goes, we make air mess, no? In his Arabic accent. And we all laugh. We go, yep. He goes, okay, I go home now. He put that airplane at 90 degrees of bank and disappeared. That nozzle showed up in our maintenance facility about 2 days later. So that's a very close call for us. The nozzle is held on by 8 bolts, and it is designed to fail there, if they have a nozzle problem. And it did exactly what it's supposed to. I've only had one really close call with a C-141 where they really came up close underneath us. And it was a new aircraft commander getting checked out on his first or second air refueling mission. And they really made it kind of an aggressive move up in the AR envelope. Our boom operator called a breakaway, got the nozzle out, and the instructor pilot pushed the yoke forward, got him away from us, and that was a little scary. But other than that, that's been it. Mike Grimwood, YouTube
Sorry, can
has
I
it.
just interrupt you there, Sluggle, before you move
Sure,
on?
sure.
I'm going to be really cheeky. Can we get you on for another 45 minutes? Because I know the questions are coming in. Would you
Yeah,
be happy with that?
yeah, sure. Yeah, let's keep going.
Yeah, so get your questions in, guys. And I've been really cheeky here with Sluggle, but yeah, get your questions in because this is great so far.
Yeah, like I said, Mike, I kind of cleaned off the afternoon because I I figured there may be some good questions, so I was prepared to sit here for 2 hours. So,
Awesome. Yeah,
like
so
I said, I'm watching airplanes fly into Salt Lake City International Airport. So if you see
yes.
me look up every once in a while outside my window,
So
I'm
plenty to
approaching
ask it. Like,
chapter
yeah.
is right here
So
in front of
so get your questions coming in, guys, because we've got 45 minutes left with Sluggo. So this is amazing. So that's great. Cheers.
me. Okay, MKMD exploration. How does an aircraft filled with fuel affect the weight to lift ratio and also characteristics of the KC-135 compared to being empty? Does it have a heavier wear and tear on the engines? Uh, for the R model engines, there is no wear and tear on those engines, believe me. They've tuned them back a couple thousand pounds. Those engines will last as long as the airframe will. Um, for takeoff, the heaviest we could take off, I believe, was 322.5. That was with 195,000 pounds of gas in our tanks. That was full tanks for our model. Full tanks for a KC-10, if I'm not mistaken, was 340,000 pounds of gas. That's a lot of frickin' gas. But the KC-10 engines, the R model engines, wasn't a problem getting us off the runway. The challenge was when you were doing a large offload, say into a C5 or a B-52 or a B-1, he's getting heavier while you're getting lighter. So I would have to inch my throttles back while the B1, C5, or B52 was inching their throttles forward. And I'm talking really small percentage changes in thrust. 3%, maybe a little less than that. And you just looked at your speed and you'd see, are you maintaining your speed? Is your speed deteriorating or is your speed increasing? And you just make those throttle adjustments. Now, as a tanker, we were always increasing because we were getting lighter. So we were constantly just having to inch the throttles back. In the big airplanes, C5, B-52, B-1, C-17, they're always inching theirs forward, okay? Remember I mentioned I did 103,000 pounds with a B-52. We were hooked up for 22 minutes. So there was this constant throttle adjustment where I'm pulling back and he's pushing up in order to maintain the 275 with the C5, C-17, and the B-52. B-1, we refuel at 320 knots with his wings swept out. And again, they're making these small throttle adjustments, pushing it up as we're pulling it back. It's not something we're coordinating over the radio. It's just something that we're naturally doing as we see the airspeed indicator either moving up or down or stabilize at the right speed. So that's a great question. And, of course, as fuel's going off me, I'm getting lighter. I'm having to reduce thrust. The receiver is getting heavier, having to push their thrust up. And we never made any radio calls, hey, I'm pushing my throttles up or whatever. We just did it. And our receivers did the same thing. There was never any communication back and forth about that. It was just maintain 320 or 275 or 315 with the fighters. And they expected that. That's what our books say. That's what was briefed, and that's what we did. So good question. If a drogue is accidentally ripped off during flight, what happens to it? It becomes a party favor for the Navy. That's what happens to it. I'm sure you guys have seen pictures of our drogue on the end of the probe. And it happens, believe me. I have not lost a drogue off of a tanker, but it has happened. Our drogue on the KC-135 that we put on the boom is very heavy. It weighs about 255 pounds, if I remember right. The Navy guys call it the wrecking ball or the Iron Maiden for that reason. Because if you get hit with it, it's going to break something. And I know of an F-18 pilot that had our drogue off of our boom, the Iron Maiden, hit his canopy and shattered it over Afghanistan in the winter. He said the top half of him, it was frozen on the way home. The bottom half of him was sweating because he turned the heat up all the way in his cockpit. He'd kind of hunkered down underneath the windscreen and the HUD, and they sent us a picture of the crew taking the nozzle, or excuse me, taking the basket off, and it's wound with this onto this knuckle with wire, and when it comes off, it looks like a slinky, the old slinky toy that went back and forth like this with. And that's the real problem, is where does that wire slinky thing go? You hope it doesn't go down an engine. Most of the time it goes up over the top of the wings, but it's back there beating around until it either falls off or they land. I know of one F-14 pilot that when he trapped and as he was coming to a stop, the basket came off the probe and went down the deck. Fortunately, since they're angled off, it went down the deck and off the end of the deck into the ocean. So, but normally that thing stays put. And they get back to the carrier, they take it off, and we always get a message back saying, thanks for the party favors, or they'll send us a picture of it sitting in their ready room or something like that. But when that happens, it's not a lot of fun. And you just have to turn the pumps off, because now you just got a hose out there with fuel going through it until you get everything turned off. So good question. MKMD exploration, the tanker's mission, even if laden with fuel. Not quite sure what you mean there. All right, let me back up here a little bit. A lot of good questions coming in here. Hang on. Simon Narbet is asking, are the airframe beefed up, example, wing spars, to cope with the weight? Yes. Very good question, Simon. The KC-135, when it went through the R model conversion, all of the wings were reskinned. And they did work, I think, on the wing boxes also, and the spars, because of the new engines. The old J57s weren't quite as heavy as the R model engines, the CFM56s. So when they went through that modification, Simon, they all got a wing reskin as part of the modification when they were made into R models, which allowed them to fly even longer. When I was in the UK in 2016 with my wife and my son, we had been touring Europe for 80 days. We took my son out of school and went to 10 countries in 80 days in the spring of 2016. We flew home on 8874, KC-135 out of Mildenhall. 8874 used to be my airplane. It had my name on it at Kadena. And at that time, it had over 24,000 hours and 6,000 landings. So that wing reskin allowed us to keep flying these airplanes longer. And who knows how long these things are going to fly. With the problems with the KC-46. And I don't know if you guys know, they've already retired 2 KC-10s to the boneyard. The other one just showed up. The first one was about a month ago. The second one just showed up like within the last couple of days. So the KC-10s are now retiring also, which has kind of put us at a disadvantage there refueling wise. And we're looking into how we're going to deal with that. Tim Harris asked, when refueling a big aircraft such as a B-52, do you have to be careful with speed management as the 135 gets lighter and the B-52 heavier? Tim just answered that question, so if it's all right with you, I'm going to skip that. Yes, you have to make throttle adjustments. As I get lighter, my throttles are coming back. As he gets heavier, his throttles are going up. And our contract with each other is just maintain that 275 knots. And that's what we do, okay? Freco Puny asking, how would you have felt about being an RAF Victor tanker pilot? Already talked about that one, sorry. Brockwell Lane, are there rules about refueling over land and minimum altitudes? That's a great question. We do low altitude refueling in the KC-10 and the KC-135, Brockwell. We don't go below 3,000 feet, and we don't go over 275 knots. The reason we've done that, obviously, is stress on the airframe. The KC-46, brand new airplane, they may go faster, may go lower. Don't know yet. But a typical mission with a special operations C-130, such as an MC-130 or an AC-130 gunship, we did at 3,000 feet at 220 knots, sometimes 210, depending on how heavy the AC-130 gunship was. If the AC-130 gunship had just arrived on station and was getting its gas just before going on station, they were very heavy with ammo. Because remember, all the guns on the airplane, the 105, the 40s, the 20 millimeter, it's full of ammunition. So it's heavy. So we may do it at 210 knots. Now, the challenge with that, Brickwell, was it states in our air refueling manuals that if you go below 190 knots in the KC-135, the boom rudder vaders won't have enough airflow over them to move the boom around. So we were very reluctant to go below 205 knots. And I have refueled A-10s at 9,000 feet at 210 knots. And it made me kind of nervous because we were 20 knots from that 190 knots, all right? But again, the A-10s were there and we had to do it. So we had to put our flaps down to 20 degrees, slow down to 210 knots to refuel the A-10s. And having our flaps down made for kind of a real weird wake turbulence behind our airplane. So, but that's just the way we did it, all right? The other thing you have to deal with, obviously, is bird strikes. Mother Nature can interject whenever she wants. And migratory birds, I mean, you know how it is in the UK. You have a lot of different birds that migrate south to Spain and Africa and so forth. Those big stork-like cranes, there's been numerous airplanes that run into those. And that's a big bird, okay? There's a famous battle in Afghanistan called Roberts Ridge, the SEAL team that was stuck on top of the ridge. The two F-15s that were involved in that were call sign Twister 5-1 and Twister 5-2. Twister 5-2 was F-15E tail number 1701. So it flies this famous mission. The guys get silver stars 2 years later. 1701, tail 1701 is back in the States flying a low-level mission over near Roanoke, Virginia, and has a fully mature turkey vulture go down the right engine. The engine explodes. The F-15 is on fire. They're at 700 feet going 420 knots. The pilot gets it up away from the ground, but it takes out the hydraulic system, so the airplane's starting to roll over on its side, and they punch out. And that famous airplane was destroyed in a cow pasture in Virginia. And on low altitude missions, you always have to look at the migratory bird season and understand where all the birds are going to come from, because there may be a lot of birds flying south for the winter or flying north during the summer. So that was one of the things that we always had to look at. Holly Bassman, the evolution of the KC-135 through the years. What was your favorite that maybe made you go, wow, as to the changes of flying the tanker? Polly, I will never forget the first time we pushed up our model engines with about 60,000 pounds in the tanks, and we went down the runway like a rocket. Now, it's not like being in an F-15, but you have to remember, I was flying an airplane that, with the old water wagon engines, J-57s only put out 13,000 pounds of thrust maximum. And now I've got an engine that's putting out 22,000 pounds of thrust maximum. So it's doubled the thrust, okay? And we were off the runway in like 3,000 feet. It was ridiculous. So you had all this power now in the tanker. The first real heavyweight R model takeoff I made with 180,000 pounds, that was pretty momentous too, because again, you just had so much power in the airplane. The takeoff procedures were different also because the engines were so reliable and you had so much thrust that we typically did a 20 flap, what we call XL takeoff, where it's just normal, like going like this, bringing the flaps up, and off you go. It was a lot different in the KC-135A models and Q models because it was so underpowered. But yeah, I remember sitting in the seat and pushing the A model or the R model engines up for the first time and going, "Holy smokes!" And I was stationed at Kadena at the time, Paulie, with F-15s, 3 F-15 squadrons. And when we finally got our R models over there, they were wowed and amazed too that we were keeping up with them in afterburner going down the runways. Particularly with lighter fuel loads. So we created a takeoff procedure where we'd get a green light from the tower and the tanker would take off and the F-15s would wait, I think it was 5 seconds. And by the time we got our gear and flaps up and we were passing 300 to 500 feet, the F-15s would be joining underneath us. And we could kind of mask them underneath us and fly to like North Korea or someplace with them underneath us. It was pretty amazing. The story of moving the R models and modifying the R models is really a great story. And those engines almost didn't make it on the tanker. There's a really good book called The Power to Fly by a GE engine engineer, and he tells the story of the CFM56 and when the French and the Americans got together to create that company. It's really a fascinating story. So next one, Doug, can you explain what was going on with the picture refueling 90 degrees at angle of bank? How'd you like that, huh? Believe it or not, that was something we did in training. When you upgraded to instructor pilot in the KC-135, there was a mission that we did where we were going on air refueling track 7 Alpha Bravo. It goes up the Sierra Nevada mountains up to Portland, Oregon, turns west out north of Portland, and then goes down the Oregon and California coast. And while we were on that track, we would do what's called the whifferdille, or we just call it the whiff. And what it was to show you that your receiver can move your tanker. And what it would do is the B-52 would come under us and it would move this way. And the airplanes would go like this, okay? And we'd start the leaf down, all right? And we were connected when we were doing this. We had the boom in the receptacle of the B-52. And it was just to show a confidence maneuver that says, look, the law of physics aren't any different when you're at 30 degrees of bank or 90 degrees of bank, okay? The G's are a little different, you know, in the pull, but we would actually go down the leaf like this and then back up and then down the other way during the whiff. It was an amazing thing to see. And they don't do it now. When the tanker community came into Air Mobility Command, people said, what the heck are you doing this for? And it was taken out of the syllabus. But I was upgrading to instructor in the old SAC days. And that was a confidence maneuver that we did, upgrading to instructor pilot. So I got to watch it from the front and from the back, and got some fairly interesting pictures of doing the whiff. They don't do it anymore down at Altus, you know. They took it out of the syllabus, you know. It's no fun anymore. Good question, though. Mirrored window. Could a 747 be a tanker? Yes. Is there a sweet spot in the size, both for mission parameters and handling techniques? You know, it really doesn't matter, because the handling techniques and the envelope, as we call it, you just figure out, you know, where's the sweet spot for an airplane under a 747. Now, let me tell you a fascinating story. The Iranians have 707 tankers. I think there's 720 models, and they have, I think, 2 747 boom-equipped tankers. During the Iran-Iraq War in the 80s, this goes back to, I think, somebody else's question, who was it, about low-altitude refueling. The Iranians found out that the Iraqis were putting bombers at H3 airfield, which is on the far western portion of Iraq. The H3 complex has got like 3 different runways, and they had to go out there and deal with it. So the Iranians planned the mission, refueling mission, to go across Turkey, down Syria, and into Iraq to bomb that airfield and to particularly destroy these bombers that were being based there. Because remember, they were using chemical weapons during that war. Both sides were. Well, the 707s were refueling the F4s, and I think there was 8 F4s loaded with bombs and missiles, Maverick missiles, and of course the gun. At 300 feet, at 315 knots, over the deserts of Syria. 300 feet, okay? 100 meters. And Mike, I'll send you the link to the story of this. And Wikipedia actually has it and shows how they did it. But they were at 300 feet, 315 knots, refueling, trying to stay under Iraqi radar with these big airplanes, going down to the H3 complex. And on their return, they were refueling them low with the 747 and the 707s, going back to their base. Really, really sketchy mission doing that. But they pulled it off at 300 feet. Now, you can imagine, 315 knots, 300 feet, you make one wrong stick input, you are in the sand. So my hat's off to these Iranian pilots and both the tanker and fighter guys for refueling 300 feet, 350 knots on this combat mission. That is the lowest I've ever heard of an air refueling happening in combat. 300 feet, 315 knots. All right. And like I said, yes, they have 747 tankers. We looked at 747 tankers, and our Air Force considered it unfeasible for I don't know for what reasons, but I think it was because the 757, 767 airplanes were coming on into the inventory of the airlines, much more fuel efficient, could fly farther, and so forth. So I think that's why. But yeah, the Iranians have 747 tankers, and they have used them in combat. They've had them for a long time. And a 300-foot altitude mission in a tanker, oof, that took some balls. All right. Okay. Brockwell Lane, does the probe lock in place on the receiver aircraft to hold it in place? The probe actually has, I think it's 3 little teeth that pop up like this when it's connected to kind of hold the basket in place. But we have nothing that holds the boom or the extension in place. The boom operator is told to put the boom elevation at 30 degrees and put the pipe all the way out and just let the Navy receivers deal with it. That's how we refuel the Navy. A number of Navy guys always tell us lock the boom in place. Can't do that. We don't have a lock in place for the boom. They just have to deal with it. And that basket, as you know, in turbulence, bounces around a lot. It gets pretty challenging. All right. Gas full. Hello. How incoming planes should align with the KC-135? Always the left wing and in a position so the tanker pilot sees them. No, it's not. Actually, they move from left to right. Or is it right to left? They move from right to left. So the airplanes will come up to the right wing. The first one will come to the boom, and he'll come to the left wing after he's refueled. So they'll be out the co-pilot's window when they first arrive. When they're all done air refueling, they'll be out the pilot's window. And I've got lots of pictures, obviously, of this happening. I kept my camera with me everywhere I go. And Mike has some of these pictures he'll put up, I'm sure, later on. John Brackenbury, why do you think the Soviet Russians never developed a boom system for their own, especially given that some of the big heavies in their force, refueling the Tu-95 and 160, must take ages using the hose? You are absolutely right. It takes wait a minute. Sorry. John Brackenbury, let me go back to your question. Do you have any trouble with static electricity during refuelings? I used to drive a road tanker carrying Jet A avgas. We had to be careful with static electricity. We're up in the air, and static electricity is an issue and so forth, usually around thunderstorms. And we try and stay as far away from the thunderstorms as we can. John, yes, I've been in airplanes that have been struck by lightning. I've been struck by lightning 3 times now. You can tell when the static electricity is building up on your airplane, and that is usually a good indication you're about to get struck by lightning. So you just move out of the way. But none of the airplanes are grounded, obviously, in the air. So I've never had an issue with static electricity connecting to another airplane. Never seen it, so I can't say anything more about that. All right. Freckle Puny asks about the Russians. I have no idea why the Russians never developed a boom system for their Tu-95s and the Tu-160s. Their Midas tankers are all hose and drogue, and I've seen some really good GoPro cameras have changed the way we all see the world. There has been numerous folks in the back of the Midas tanker taking wonderful video of Tu-95s being refueled. But again, they're only being refueled at 1,000 pounds a minute. And if they're taking 60 to 80,000 pounds, that's a long time. They chose to do it that way. They don't have booms. I don't know why they didn't do that, but that's how they do it. Tim Harris, is the KC-135 fitted with ejection seats like the B-52? Nope, and they don't even have parachutes in them anymore. They took the parachutes out of them about 9 years ago. So there's only been one crew that has parachuted out of a KC-135. And that was because the gear didn't come down. The pilot told the navigator, the co-pilot, navigator, and boom operator to jump out of the jet over Edwards Air Force Base, which I understand they did. And he flew the airplane down to a belly landing. That's the only one that I know of. We do not have ejection seats. The seats are actually pretty comfortable. There just hasn't been a need for us to have that kind of capability in the airplane. Tim Brockwell, I'd imagine a tanker is quite vulnerable to enemy fighters. Do you carry countermeasures? No, we do not. But Brockwell, we are the most overprotected airplane out there. Everybody knows gas runs an air campaign. Tankers always have their own defensive counter-air airplanes protecting them. Yes, we have procedures that we will implement to retrograde if we have to, but ask any fighter pilot who is doing defensive counter-air for tankers, you want to put a smile on his face real fast? Just tell him MiGs are coming to attack the tanker. They come off the tanker full of gas, full of weapons, and can chase anything down. Yeah, put a smile on a fighter gal's face. There are always defensive counter-air combat air patrols near us, protecting us. The fighter guys will tell us if they think they need us to retrograde or scram away from a dogfight or something like that. You have to remember, if they do get in a dogfight, the first thing that comes off is their tanks, usually centerline first, wings next. So they're losing the capability to carry gas, which means, they'll be screaming for gas as soon as they need it. And Desert Storm, there was a lot of that going on where the F-15 guys dropped tanks and were screaming for us to come get them as soon as we could. All right. Read the KC-135R model could outclimb a T-38. I have flown both airplanes. The T-38, we call it the White Rocket. It'll outblast a 135 any day of the week. Does the Drogue system have a design-in failure point in case of emergency like the boom you talked about? Yeah, it's that knuckle. It's just behind this knuckle where this wire-like slinky thing is. It's made to come off there. Like I said, the slinky comes off and kind of whips around a lot, but that's where it's designed to break off. Good question. When do you think the very last KC-135 will be retired? Somewhere around 2040, I'd be willing to bet. 2040. So you were at 2020? Yeah, 20 more years. I bet you see KC-135s flying for 20 more years. And I mean, think about that. That's 90 years of service. 55 is when they came out. They think the B-52 will actually serve for 100 years. Tankers, 80 to 90 years. Yeah, I could see that happening easily. Tim Harris asking, what is your favorite ground-based training you have done, such as Siri? Siri was not fun. Ground-based training, obviously flying in the sim. Flying in the simulators, and our simulators were really good. They had all the best flight package stuff in it, everything. I mean, we could go anywhere. We could simulate any kind of emergencies in the simulator. They've moved a lot of training that we used to do in the airplane to the simulator. We used to do engine out procedures in the real airplane. They don't do any of that stuff anymore. They do it all in the sim, where you lose an engine and have to fly 3 engine approaches and stuff like that, which is not a problem. So the ground-based training that we did in the simulator was really good. And we could test a lot of our procedures and new things that we wanted to do in the simulators. Okay, Brockwell Lane, how many crew members in the KC-135? I started with 4, Brockwell. We had aircraft commander, instructor pilot, co-pilot, navigator, boom operator. With the Pacer Crag new avionics, we are now pilot, co-pilot, and boom operator, only the 3. On some missions, we'll add a load master if we're carrying cargo in the back. Load master means another boom operator, because they do both load master duties and boom duties. So, but that's pretty rare. Most of the time, it's just 3 now. All right. What aircraft do you wish I had gotten to fly? F-14. Got to fly an F-15. Almost got to fly an F-16. Got to fly in an S-3 Viking. I wish I could have been shot off an aircraft carrier deck in an F-14. Paulie Bassman, how many fighters could you refuel in one sitting? The most is 8 we're allowed to have on our tanker at one time. The average is usually 4, sometimes 6, but 8 was the most, and I've refueled 8 F-16s at one time on a really hairy mission that you'll have to read about in the book. My book, Tanker Pilot, Lessons from the Cockpit, you can get on Amazon or buy in bookstores there in the United Kingdom. And there's a mission in there that I describe where we got launched off to go pull F-16s out of Iraq. The pilot that came to our boom only had 800 pounds in his tanks. He had about 6 minutes of flying left before he flamed out when he hooked up to us. Really scary mission. Freckle Puny, how often did you haul cargo in a KC-135? During my time frame, it was pretty rare to put cargo in the back. Now they do carry a lot of cargo, and they do aeromedical evacuation, where they take wounded folks out of the Gulf region and bring them back to the States. So they basically configure the airplane with like a hospital. I never got to do that mission, but I understand it's really an emotional mission. All right, Paulie Bassman. Most grateful fighter jock after you gave them fuel. That guy that we gave 800 pounds to, that had 800 pounds, and we gave him gas, man, he was very appreciative, because that was 32 F-16s that had less than 1,500 pounds in them, and all 32 of those F-16s, if we didn't make it to them, we're going to all have to punch out. Imagine losing 32 F-16s because they didn't have gas. We could not let that happen. And if you buy my book, I had my camera with me. There's a picture of the airplanes out on the wings, and you can see all that, and you can read about how that happened, because we came in the building and told, you are flying this mission now, you got 30 minutes to take off, and it was just a drag race to get to these guys so that they didn't run out of gas. Pepper, what's the min engines that KC-135 can safely stay flying? You know what? I know the answer to that question, because during Desert Storm, we had a KC-135 E model that actually got accidentally got in the wake turbulence of another airplane, and it went this way and this way and this way, and it threw both left wing engines off into the desert, and they actually landed the airplane with 2 engines missing on one side. It was an incredible feat of airmanship, bringing that airplane home. And there's a lot of pictures out there. If you like Google tanker that lost 2 engines in the desert, you'll see the pictures of it. It's amazing. That crew did a phenomenal job bringing that airplane back. Okay. Tim Harris, when a fighter has underwing tanks, can the fuel they take on be transferred to them? Yes. All of the fighters can move that gas around. They normally will use the gas in the external tanks first and then switch to their internal tanks. But yes, we can refuel when we're putting fuel into them, they will open all their valves up, and the gas will actually go into the wing tanks, into the main tanks, and so forth. That's how they do it. Okay. Have KC-135s been tested with biofuels? Yes, they have, and they worked very well. And you know what? It's interesting, Frico Puny, you asked that question because I haven't heard anything else about that. They had a B-1 that flew on biofuels. They had a tanker, I believe, that flew on biofuels. I don't think they've done anything with it. I really don't. So, all right. That is the end of the questions so far.
Yeah,
Mike, you have a question?
think we're going to wrap up this Q&A here, like Sluggo. Just give me 2 seconds. So, we obviously got some great questions there, and thank you very much for everyone who joined us. But he's Sluggo's book, Tanker Pilot. There's some great pictures in there, but where can we find that online? And tell us about what you're up to at the moment.
So, Tanker Pilot is available through Amazon or any good bookstores that you'd find there in Europe. Okay, and Mike, you've got the book there. Amazon is the best way they do it here in the States. I don't know about Amazon over there, but any good bookstores across Europe should have the book for you. Wall Pilot, the graphics I told you about. Our Facebook page is just facebook.com/wallpilot. You can go there and you can see some of the airplanes that we've done. We take orders through the instant messaging there. We do custom work. I don't know how much it would cost postage-wise to send packages because it comes in a kind of a long box over to the UK and in Europe. But I can find that out and get that out to you, okay, Mike? And, hey, the next time we do this, I have flown in a lot of different airplanes. I've flown F-15s. I've been off of carrier decks. I've planned and executed all kinds of different crazy missions. So next time we do this, I'll open it up to any question, not just air refueling and KC-135s, but stuff that are going on in the Gulf. And I recently did a podcast where we talked about the drone strike on Qasem Soleimani.
Oh, wow.
And there's actually information that's out about that now and about how they did that. So
yeah, because were you recently on there? Was it the Fight the Pilot podcast? Yeah. And I've been on Ramp Check Global twice now too. Yes,
so.
I've seen that. Yeah. Which is awesome, but but
yours is international. I mean, yours is doing great, Mike.
Oh, thank you very much.
I always enjoy being on with you, Mike.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. You're a great bloke, and your book's amazing, obviously. And Wall Pilot's going to be just to our viewers who are just tuning in, but we chatted a bit offline, but Wall Pilot is crazily great. The graphics, I'll obviously connect you guys in the description below, but incredible graphics. It's amazing.
I sent you some email. I think I sent you some in an email. I sent you a couple. I sent you the T1 and I think an F-15 and some other stuff too. And anyway, you guys will be able to see it. But again, you can go to facebook.com/wallpilot and you can see the stuff that we do. We do World War I, World War II, Korean War, Vietnam War. We've done a lot of F4s and any modern stuff. And we can draw just about anything. We had to do 2 MiGs for a guy that flew MiGs with the Air Force's Red Eagle Squadron, a MiG-21 and MiG-23.
Yeah.
And it took one of my artists 48 hours to do both of those. So anyway.
And when you go to the website or the Facebook page, you'll see the quality of it. It's absolutely incredible. The detail, attention to detail is amazing. My favourite is probably, I can't remember what squadron it was from, but it was an F-15 one, and it was just absolutely brilliant. But Mark, I'm probably going to have to get you to do an F3 one.
Sure.
We'll have to sort
Sure.
something out on that case, because it's my favorite plane, obviously.
Okay. So here's the thing that you can do, and all of these listening in, all I need to know is what squadron you want it from, what weapons load you want, and so forth. And we could probably draw it up. I've got the blueprints to do Typhoons. I do have the Tornadoes now too. Okay. And all you got to do is tell me a time frame, what squadron you want it from, what kind of weapons load you want it on it, and so forth, and we can draw it up.
There you go, guys. Get in touch with Mark, and if you want like a great, wall poster for whatever favorite aircraft you like, or if you've been part of a squadron. But thank you very much for coming in the comments, and Mark, thank you very much for being a guest on this show. It's been absolutely brilliant.
Hey, it's been fun again being with you, and I really enjoy this, and this good questions and so forth. So, to all of you over there, have a good night, have a good week, rest of the week.
Cheers.
Cheers.